We always get a question, Marcus, from sixth formers, year 12 students who say that for whatever reason, their GCSEs didn't go as well as they thought they would, or their GCSEs don't reflect on, or they don't feel like it reflects on their academic ability, that they believe that they could thrive in Cambridge, but they just don't have the right grades, the right paperwork. In those situations, what is it that those students can do in order to kind of have a chance with Cambridge? Because I think I've always, in those instances, kind of seen that they could, in terms of to improve their paperwork, improve what their grades are on paper, apply post A-level.
Yeah, applying post A-level is always an option. And of course, when people do that, it does change things a little bit, because it means that if we are really impressed by their application, they don't receive a conditional offer, because obviously they've already got their A-level grades. So they would just receive an unconditional offer. So in other words, assuming they choose to accept our offer, then it's just automatic that they join us. So that's a completely valid route, and it's never the majority of people who apply post-qualification, as we call it. That's the kind of jargon. It's never the majority of people, but there's always a significant minority who do. And they're assessed in the same way. I mean, it's not as if we have, sort of extra tasks for people who apply that way. They just apply and in the usual way and are assessed in the usual way. But as I say, it does mean that when we're making our decision, we can see what they've achieved in their A-levels or their IB or whatever, and we can say, well, okay, if we choose to offer to this person, then they'll almost certainly join us, because, as I say, the only reason they wouldn't join us is if they subsequently chose that they didn't want to, which is fine, that can be a good route. And you mentioned things like GCSE performance. I mean, it's not unusual for us to see people applying with, let's say, kind of patchy GCSEs. They've done okay, but they haven't done amazingly. They haven't just aced everything in their GCSEs, and that's not necessarily a deal breaker for us. We tend to be looking for people who are on an upward trajectory. And there's all sorts of reasons why people might underperform at the GCSE stage. So in some cases, people just haven't become interested in their subject by then. So they're coasting a bit at GCSE. They're not really like trying particularly hard. Or they are interested in their subject and they just find the GCSE stage a bit boring. And then they really get engaged and excited and sort of committed at the subsequent stage, whether that's A-level or IB or Scottish Highers or whatever. We're often looking for people who seem to be sort of going up and up and up and up in terms of their achievement, rather than people who aced everything at GCSE and then have struggled ever since. Because, we want to make offers to students who we can help to develop further. As a university, we'd like to kind of add value to those students. I wouldn't be nervous about applying with a slightly patchy GCSE record. Some of the students who receive offers and then come here and go on to achieve the best possible results here do come from an academic background where the GCSEs weren't absolutely stellar.
I guess a student is in a tricky situation where they don't have the best GCSEs, and then that affects the predicted grades that their teachers give them. And I think if a student has a set of predicted grades that is far below what the entry requirements are, but they believe that they can achieve the entry requirements, then it's quite a niche scenario. But we hear a lot of students talk about it quite often. If in those situations where the predicted grades is far below the entry requirement, by all means the student can achieve the entry requirements through actually get the grades with the A-levels, and by all means apply post A-level, because if you don't have the best GCSEs and you didn't have the best predicted grades, but you have the A-level grades, that kind of overwrites any of the paperwork.
Absolutely,
beforehand.
yeah. And I mean, we do receive predicted grades from the schools that our applicants are at, at the point when they apply. And predicted grades are helpful in some respects. I mean, to be honest about this, we know that some schools are slightly optimistic in their predictions. And we also know that some schools are slightly pessimistic in their predictions. So it's really hard to treat the predicted grades as being a 100% reliable source of information. But obviously, if someone has subsequently gone on to obtain their A-level results or their IB results or whatever, then that is 100% reliable. If someone's got, 2 A stars and an A in their A-levels, that's just a fact. That's something that's concrete. That's something that we can factor into our decision making with a considerable degree of confidence. Whereas a predicted grade, even if it's very eye-catching, someone might be predicted 3 A stars, it doesn't necessarily mean that person will go on to obtain 3 A stars. It's a prediction. And so, it can make a difference if the actual exam results are kind of already in the bag, because from our perspective, it eliminates some of the uncertainty.
But it sounds like from what you're saying that for all sorts of reasons, even if your predicted grades aren't great and your GCSE grades aren't great either, a student still should try and apply, and especially with something like the August reconsideration pool, which we're going to go into more detail later. If said student were to meet the entry requirements, there are systems in place to reconsider them, and they might be considered to be given an offer because of their other parts of their paperwork, like their admissions assessments and interviews. Which is a good point, if you score really highly on the admissions assessment, that is going to be a piece of information that's going to be considered alongside your predicted grades, your grades, and similarly with the interview.
Exactly. And I think it's also worth mentioning that people can reapply, because sometimes people don't, they're not aware that they can. So in other words, if you apply maybe with slightly patchy GCSEs, maybe with slightly low score predictions, and then if you're unsuccessful, you can choose to reapply the following year when you will have your A-level results or your IB results or whatever. And if they're obviously very, very sort of convincing results, it maybe puts you in a much stronger position that year, because we're not relying on the predictions and stuff like that. And you're so far removed from the GCSEs that the GCSE performance is not a particularly significant factor when someone's already got their A-levels or their IB results. So people can apply more than once. And again, just worth saying that, because sometimes people are surprised that that's the case.
Yeah, exactly.